This is episode 22 with Brian Wong. Hi, my name is Leon Gabrielian, and this is the Thriving Life Club, the podcast for those who want to thrive in every area of life. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the club. Let's begin. Welcome back to the club, champion. Our today's guest is Brian Wong. He's the author of The Cheat Code, Going Off Script to Get More, Go Faster, and Shortcut Your Way to Success. He's also the CEO of Kiip, a mobile advertising company he co-founded in 2010 when he was only 19 years old. Welcome to the Thriving Life Club, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So you grew up in Vancouver, Canada, right?
That's correct.
You skipped 4 years of school. You graduated from the University of British Columbia at the age of 18, which is crazy. And in 2010, you moved to San Francisco. You worked for Dig. The question I have for you to start with, how the heck did you graduate from high school at 14 years old?
So the Vancouver education system allows you to skip grades if you take IQ tests. It's not exactly the perfect model, but it's something that I learned from my teachers. So I basically took an IQ test 4 times and skipped grades 2, 7, 9, and 11, and was able to get into university at the ripe old age of 14.
Do you think it was specific to the Vancouver school system, or can anyone do it basically?
I think it varies by region, but there's always programs hidden somewhere is my advice, especially if you have children that you think are gifted or should be accelerated through their schooling. There's a larger conversation about how the school system in general is a bit broken and kind of identifying these high propensity, high potential kids. For me, I was very fortunate to have supportive teachers and supportive parents who wanted to make sure that I was able to learn at my own pace. I was the one who decided to skip. Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't my tiger parents that forced me to do it.
I've noticed that you travel a lot. Is that by design, or do you travel for business most of the time? And what are some of the most interesting stories that come to mind when you think of your travels?
Yeah, so 95% of my travels for business. We have 6 offices around the world. My time is usually spent between San Francisco and New York. To me, it's not travel, to be honest, at this point, because I have an apartment in both cities. It's just like my morning commute, except it's 5 to 7 hours on any given day. So I'm usually in either city every 2 or 3 weeks. In the middle, however, there are clients, especially because I'm in the advertising business. I have clients that are scattered across the country, and that brings me to interesting places. And then as well, because we've been doing more in Latin America, I've been spending some time down there. I've just found that in general, you can do 10 conference calls, 5 video conference calls, but 1 in-person meeting can trump them all. You can hammer through so much more when you're able to read people, see their faces, and then interact with them, take them for dinner, have drinks, these types of things. It still makes a huge difference, especially the more digital we are. I think in person makes a huge, huge difference. Interesting stories. I mean, just in general, I tend to go to a lot of museums everywhere I go. So depending on where I am in the world, I will try to find an interesting museum to go to. One of my most memorable ones was in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. I went to an auto museum. It was founded by some business magnate who decided to collect a lot of different types of cars, not just supercars, but for example, I think one of the first cars ever made was in that museum. So it was really fun. I mean, as a car fan, I still remember that experience, and it was so good to walk through a timeline of basically how the modern cars we have today evolved model by model. So anyways, just fun stuff. Museums are one of those.
You mentioned you have the company has 6 offices. It's a big company. Well, what is the size? So our listener can have a sense of what the company is, which stage is the company is at.
Yeah, so we are about 100 people now. We've raised 4 rounds of financing. We've raised about 32 million in venture capital. We're doing 20 plus million in revenue. We're profitable. So we're at a later stage, I would say, as a startup, and we're continuing to grow. I mean, we're growing not as we would in early days of 100+%, but more like 30% per year type of thing, which I think is pretty good.
And because the funding comes from venture capital, I'm assuming you're getting ready to sell it in a couple of years, maybe, right? It usually takes about 7 years for a startup to be sold.
Yeah, the average timeline is around 10 years, give or take a few years, like you're mentioning. It's not exactly always the main goal. Obviously, you want liquidity for your investors. So there's several ways to do it, right? You could buy them out, you could merge, you could IPO, you could ICO, which right now I think is starting to become more and more illegal as the days pass. But there's a lot of different models now to create this liquidity. I think in our case, the environmental components like the macroeconomic climate, along with our industry, along with our own performance, are all key factors. So I don't think we're explicitly going for a sale, but right now, if a deal passes across my desk that is an interesting one, I will certainly pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm. And you started the company, co-founded with a partner when you were 19. I've heard you talk about the age and how it affects or doesn't affect the way you do business and everyday life. You mentioned something about the jiu-jitsu and how to use it to your advantage. How do you go through that process, and what is your thinking? Because it's a bit different from everyone else.
Yeah, I think now as I get a little older, I think the age part becomes less of the front part of your explanation of who you are. I think you use what you have, right? So when I was younger, that's really what you use to get people's attention, right? Ideally, you over the years build enough cachet and success and data points under your belt that people don't have to question that as you get older, and it becomes more about that versus your age. So I usually just recommend people to do and use what they have. I am, for example, a visible minority. My parents are from Hong Kong. I am from another country. I'm from Canada. These are all different data points you could use to differentiate yourself and to open conversations. And so these are all things that I think people should use what you naturally have. And then there are things that, of course, you can unnaturally gain, which is knowledge and experience. And that, of course, is important as well.
And as the CEO, Brian, as the CEO of the company, pretty busy, how do you manage your time? What are some of the things that you use on a daily basis or have in place set up to manage your time better?
Yeah, so my time management is usually by themed days. So there are days where I will spend time on different parts of the business. So on business development and publisher relations. One day could be on advertisers and brands. Another day could be on products. Now, obviously, the world doesn't work like that all the time. So there's still periods of blocks of time I have for unexpected stuff. So more like fires that need to be put out, issues that need to be solved immediately, working with legal on some type of a extraneous issue. I mean, there's so many different types of things that could come up. So as long as you have time in your day to address that, you'll be fine. But I think theming allows you to focus and also allows you to put your brain in a track of thinking where you can focus your energy and time on something and be more efficient with it. The other productivity hack I use is simply just put the 5 or 6 things you want to finish. Sometimes it could be as few as 2 or 3, depending on the size of the project. But you write these things down at the beginning of the day, and you just make sure you don't finish your day until you finish those things. So that's just how I run it. I could be as busy as I want. I could get distracted with phone calls. I could be going out to drinks with friends. I could be at a business dinner, but I haven't really finished what I wanted to finish for that day until I finish that list. And that's how I recommend people structure their day, because at least at the beginning of the day, you have this list of things. You don't get distracted. You can get distracted. At least you don't get distracted from not completing it by the end of the day.
What do you notice on a daily basis around you, about your peers and people nowadays in general that you would never do or would do differently?
So there's a few rules of thumbs. I think as a CEO, you never freak out. You never make rash decisions on the spot without at least thinking about it, spending time on it. These are key rules that I think just allow you to project yourself as a calm, collected, calculated thinker. These are important traits, especially because people need to continue to have confidence in you. The moment you lash out or have an outburst, people will lose confidence in you. So that's sort of things that I would never do. And in terms of things that I, again, encourage people to do is know that, at least in most situations, especially in our industries, especially in tech, no one's going to die. I'm in advertising. No one's, it's not a life or death situation. We're not curing cancer here. We're putting ads on people's phones. So if there's a decision that needs to be made, sometimes there's no need to freak out. There's no need to make rash decisions. There's no need to get angry or have emotions involved. It's just about, let's just work through it piece by piece. I think it's important to help folks take a step back, unpack what is happening, structure it in a way that feels like it's less daunting. I think is the best gift a leader can give to his team or her team, because that way they feel like things are better, things are workable, things are solvable around this person. The last thing you want to be is like, the house is on fire, the sky is falling. No one will ever want to work in an environment like that.
Definitely. Being the CEO of a company or whether the person is a CEO of their life, those qualities will help in both environments. I know your definition of a success is different. What is your definition of success? How do you see it?
Success is, it's cliche to say it's not about money, it's not about fame or power. In my opinion, success is about optionality. Optionality just meaning you can kind of have the freedom to do whatever you want whenever you want, and not only have the resources to do it. So of course, money is important, but the social capital, which would be your reputation and your network. So opening doors, sometimes you can open a door with money, but you might open the door faster or go into a conversation where things will become more beneficial to you if you come in with a reputation or with an introduction that has a lot more weight to it. So these are all very obvious things, but people sometimes focus too much on nickel and diming and forget there's a longer game to be played, right? If that's someone that you're working with, it might cost you this thing here and there to build a better relationship, but you shouldn't be counting in dollars and cents with people. It should be about how honestly you make them feel. I think the number one rule is, how do you leave someone feeling? That will be how they will remember you, at least from the first impression that you leave with them, and then that will help dictate how successful your relationship will be.
You wrote a book. It's called The Cheat Code: Going Off Script to Get More, Go Faster, and Shortcut Your Way to Success. Let's talk about the book.
Yes, the book was inspired just by the whole generation we're in and how we consume information, which is in short, bite-sized chunks. And so advice in the business world sometimes comes in the form of very long-winded biographies and self-help books that are written by people who are either not qualified to write them or have been successful in an entirely different generation. This is the challenge, I think, that a lot of us face. Is I could read a book about Richard Branson, but he started doing business before the internet was invented. So there's certain things you can learn from him, but there's certain things that just don't apply. So we realized, aka myself and my publisher, realized that there's an opportunity to create a modern business book that allows people to apply these cheat codes, as it were, to real life. And so the ability to use these cheat codes in real life and apply them quickly is the appeal. We don't want people to think that this is something that they have to start off in this eat, pray, love, self-transformation thing that takes a couple years. It's something you could literally do in the next 5 minutes, and it could potentially exponentially change the future course of your business career and success and your personal life as well.
What do you consume? What kind of books do you consume? What do you get your continuing education?
I almost entirely consume nonfiction, which I think a lot of people would frown upon. I'm trying to see if there's a way for me to start dabbling into fiction, but the book that I'm in right now is Sapiens, which I'm sure has been talked about a lot by many people around you. It is a very popular book right now. I can see why after digging in. It's a very elegant way to explain human history from the lens of kind of why our species became the only and dominant human species. But by explaining that, it explains really the course of how the entire world came to be, basically, but in a semi abridged version. So very, very interesting read. I'm not done it yet, but that's the one that I'm digging into right now. I find my source of inspiration through art and culture, so through traveling in museums and visuals. So everything from art to advertising, because I consume that on a regular basis as part of my work. There's enough creative inspiration there.
In your book, you also outlined the 71 cheat codes that help someone go faster. How were you able to help through your book your peers or entrepreneurs, business people to go faster?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost point here is that it's about the environment that we're in. You know, we live in an age of information where things move so fast. As a result, by nature, I'm expressing to the reader that things should be moving faster. Everything from how you get promoted in corporate to how you communicate ideas and how ideas can become real. In the past, just career progression would take decades. Now it could take a couple years for someone to get to a VP level. And it's just fascinating to see how these things are happening. So that's really one kind of overarching point. The main helpful cheat codes are around your mindset. So there's a couple, for example, one of them that's gotten really popular is knowing your superpower. So knowing the thing that you're really good at and focusing all your energy on that, and then not focusing your energy on trying to fix your weaknesses. I think as we grew up, we were trained to try to fix our weaknesses, right? We get bad grades in a class, and then we spend all this extra credit time on tutors and making sure that we can get better and improve that grade. But in real life, there are things that you're just going to be really good at, and you're going to enjoy doing that more, and you're going to be more efficient in spending your time doing those things. And in the real world, you have the ability to hire people or work with people who complement you so that your weaknesses are essentially compensated. That is, I believe, the best way to create a very well-oiled team. My superpower is to get people super excited about stuff. Basically, my day starts off and everything I do during the day pretty much orients towards that. Obviously, there's general CEO duties you have to take care of. But most of the time, that's really where I spend my time, and why, quite honestly, I spent some time to decide if I wanted to move to New York or not, and realized that it was a no-brainer because most of our customers were here, and the impact I could make here could be a lot greater than if I were to spend most of my time in San Francisco.
So how did you discover your strengths? Was it, the fact that you used to put on parties when you worked for Dig? Did that help you to kind of figure out that you are good at making people excited? How did you go about discovering it?
I think it's just, when people ask the question, well, how do I know my superpower?
Right.
It's a great question. And the way you find this out is just look back on your past and look at where there were moments where it never felt like work to you. or it just seemed effortless. So I have friends that, of course, are very, very artistic, have a great eye for user experience and user interface. They never went to school and go, especially in elementary school and high school, I want to do UI UX. They might have had that manifest in the art that they produced, or their eye for photography, or something that kind of represented that. And just because you're good at photography doesn't mean you have to be a photographer, right? This is one thing people don't also seem to realize that I'm trying to expose, which is when we go to school, we study things. We'll study chemistry, and we'll study law, and we'll study biology, but it doesn't mean that you'll be a chemist, a lawyer, and a biologist. There's a lot of horizontal transference of the value of this knowledge and other subject matters. So if you're a great lawyer, if you work in the business world, you understand the legal implications of everything that's done, and you have a different way of thinking about things logically. Same with the lawyer skill set in the pharma space. You understand IP, you understand the implications of a drug, but you don't have to be a lawyer at the pharma company to succeed in order to use those skill sets. So it's really kind of a mixture of a few things that now I think makes people more unique and makes them more indispensable, is trying to actually combine some things that actually seem completely unrelated. Think of someone who's good at mathematics or in algorithms that ends up in finance, right? These types of things, you can understand how they all play together, but it's usually these mixes that make someone more valuable.
Did you take any tests in addition to that, like Myers-Briggs and DISC and others?
Yeah, I don't know there's like a single test you can use to understand this stuff. It's helpful to understand how to describe the things about yourself that your personality might have you leaning towards. But most of this is discovering by doing. So I always recommend people, there's an MBA in school, but there's an MBA of doing stuff, right? When you go out there and start building, creating business models, ideas, testing them, that's the way you understand where you begin to fit in the puzzle. If you don't actively work on things, there's just no way of knowing. You're constantly theorizing, and that is it's not a good place to be.
Right. Brian, let's talk about mindset, since you brought it up, and that's one of my favorite topics. What would you say is your most marked characteristic?
It's optimism. People know the stance I'm going to take on stuff because I'm naturally a very optimistic person. That comes with my energy levels. That comes with my entrenched hopefulness that things will work. And I believe ultimately that perseverance helps you basically overcome pretty much all obstacles. Like it's pretty simple. Like if you're willing to go the extra mile, mm-hmm. If you're willing to push that extra inch, people will respond and you will be rewarded.
Right. And also the quote from Einstein, he basically says, I'm not any different from you. I just stay with the problem longer.
Exactly.
People who are persistent, who stay with the problem or stay on course for longer, they naturally win because the people who don't get lost.
Correct.
They choose to lose. What would you say is your philosophy towards life in a bigger scale? That's a big question, I know.
Yeah, I know. It's my philosophy is about being a multi-interest and almost like a Renaissance type individual. I think what happened with the Industrial Revolution is we all became specialized. We started taking classes in certain fields and we started getting careers. What we didn't do was learn a whole host of different skills to be a well-rounded person. And I'm talking everything from flying a plane to being a chef to learning how to design to being a businessman or a businesswoman. These are all things that sometimes people think is impossible to combine. But I think it's very possible to put together. And that to me is the beauty of life, is you have so much time and so much opportunity to try to do these things, but people somehow feel very comfortable focusing on one career and believe that that's what they should be investing all their energy into. So I think that to me is a bit of a mindset change, and also how I believe in my philosophy on life.
Did you think this way when you were much younger, or did you develop this philosophy as you go? Because being a Renaissance man, I've been called that too, because I'm good at many other things. I have many interests, but I understand that sometimes being a Renaissance man and scattering does not help you to focus and make money in a certain area, for example. Do you think that the entrepreneur, for example, should start that way with that philosophy by being good at many things, or should they focus it on a specific thing?
Yes, I think there's a fine line between being a Renaissance man and being distracted, right? And I think what you're saying is being good at many things. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to be good at all these other things. It just means you need to just have the capabilities and the interests and the curiosity. I think when you connect multiple things together by at least having the data points from those areas, that's where you truly get inspired as well. But you will always have your core superpower, right? That will not change. So that's simply about diversifying your ability to know what you don't know. That's mostly what school provides to you, and I think that's mostly also what these things provide to you. You start digging into these other areas, you start to gain respect for different fields. It's not like you're going to be an aviation expert after you become a pilot. It's not like you're going to start building airplanes, but at least you now understand the principles behind flight, the principles behind the aviation industry, and potentially opportunities can begin to unveil themselves. And that all just comes from your curiosity in that space. Now, of course, you need to have the means and the resources to be able to pursue these things. So that's why you'll always have your core superpower, your core skill set, your core business, but then having that support everything else is really the true model of a magnate, and kind of how the modern sort of entrepreneurial lifestyle has begun expressing itself, especially with some of the folks that have adopted this philosophy over the last couple decades.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing more of a being open-minded, and I think understanding how things work in other industries or in other fields in general helps you understand, or be creative in your own industry.
Correct.
Totally agree with that. For example, understanding how chemistry works, some principles in chemistry, you're not going to become a chemist, but those things will help you, understand how food works and nutrition works very simply. And on a daily basis, making better choices as a result of that, you will, as a result, be a healthier person. That's what I think. What do you think?
That's exactly it.
What would you say is your biggest fear moving forward at this point?
I think it's always a consistent fear that you lose your sense of curiosity or your sense of wonder. I think curiosity and wonder are two youthful traits that if you ever lose, you instantly become old. So that's the fear. And that usually comes with age, which if you actively keep your mind curious and you're exposed to more of these unique things, like I mentioned, there's very little chance that you will lose those two things. So that's the balance that I continue to pursue.
Mm-hmm. Is that the same as getting bored?
I don't think it's the same as getting bored.
Do you ever get bored? Or when you do, how do you deal with boredom?
I almost never get bored. There's always something to dig your teeth into, especially because the age of information that we're in means that you're always able to access unique things.
I'm wondering, what has been your biggest mistakes this far?
I don't really look at mistakes as mistakes. I always look at them as kind of very fortunate opportunities to learn. Most of those opportunities to learn have come from judgments of character and people that I've bet on or have believed in that my gut told me otherwise. So I guess mostly it's not listening to my gut. So I think the lessons learned are just follow your gut. You're constantly reminded of that. And that's kind of where those mistakes or opportunities to learn came from. But the path you choose at the moment you choose it in should be the right one, if that makes sense, because at that moment in time, that's the decision you decided to make. So it should be right. But it's really understanding how to optimize that, which is your responsibility and a set of skills that you develop over time. And that's, I think, the another mindset that people should be taking in as well. So rather than spending all your time thinking about what you could have done, rather focus your energy on what you can do.
Most of the entrepreneurs, they have a story of their life. They've been miserable, right? They had to file a bankruptcy. They had to sell from the back of their car, and then finally they were able to do something, and then make it up and succeed. Your story is different. You even you skipped 4 years in school. You kind of got a fast start. Would you say your life has been easy relative to the rest of the entrepreneurs that go through so many things that they struggle through and face many adversities?
I think everyone that isn't born in a third world country has it easy. Let's just be frank here, right? So if you don't have to worry about getting bombed or killed or not having food on the table or even having shelter, we're already considered very fortunate. So most entrepreneurs that complain and go, oh, like I had to, be scrappy and earn money this way and that way. It was like at the end of the day, we're so lucky in general just to be in America or in a Canada or in Australia or wherever or anywhere in Europe or whatever. So that's the first thing I would say is being grateful of the platform you've been given is important for me. Recognizing that my parents did grow up in a very impoverished situation, moved to Canada to find a better life, was able to create stability for my brother and I. The number one thing I was thinking about was if my mom and dad did all this to give me a stable environment, they want me to try to use that stable environment to innovate and to do really crazy things, which is what being an entrepreneur is all about. So I think that's for sure kind of the mindset I think we should all be taking. So yes, I had a head start or a fast start, but I'm making the most of what I have, which is, I think, my responsibility. I think with others, they were dealt a different hand. Them making the most of what they have is also their responsibility as well. And I think just everyone starts from a different point in a different situation in their lives.
Brian, what do you most value in your friends? Do you have close friends?
I do. It's a small circle. I value the most their ability to hear, listen, and respond and give me thoughts that are candid and truthful. A lot of folks in my position, there will be people around them with different agendas that want to tell you what you want to hear, which is very dangerous. So having enough people around you that are willing to tell you what maybe you don't want to hear is critical.
And did you pick these friends consciously, or are these your childhood friends, people you've known for a long time?
There's a mixture of university friends, really not too many from high school or elementary school, and then a lot from the business world as well over the last 8 years that I've been in the industry. So that's the mix of people that I have in that group.
Did they prove themselves to be trustworthy over time? Do you have any cheat codes when picking friends and people you surround yourself with?
I don't think you necessarily pick friends. I think they kind of pick you. Being too selective, being too editorial about it, as it were, is potentially detrimental because now you seem to be building something for a specific purpose. But I think serendipity, I think natural relationships are a lot more healthy than facilitated and orchestrated ones. So there's no specific agenda, nor do I want them to have an agenda, even if it is the whole honesty thing. I think that just happens over time. But I am the type of person to put faith and trust in someone before they've even proven themselves to me to be worthy of that faith and trust. So that I found has been a pretty decent model, especially if I listen to my gut. If I don't, then I pay the price.
And I'm assuming you delegate a lot. What is it about people that you find so fascinating and interesting?
So I think everyone has their own version of perfect. And if you're a perfectionist, it's very dangerous to try to impose your version of perfect on theirs. So letting them be their own version of perfect is the most ideal way to delegate. And I think delegation is a unique concept people misunderstand. It's not simply passing a task off. It's letting people tell you what they think the task is, what they think the success of that task is, and to let them play that out. Now, if they're completely misaligned all the time, then you should probably part ways. But if they're the type of person with a similar personality or cultural fit, they will think the same way that you will think in most cases in the healthiest ways. It will be a very effective person to delegate to.
Mhm. Let's think of you from 19 years old when you started the company up to now. What are some of the, when you look back, what are some of the aha moments or the things that you now take for granted? Now you know that you would have never imagined or you thought differently back then. What are some of the things that could, help our listener to get a head start by, switching to the right mindset?
Yeah, the aha moment was that you don't have to be a biologist if you study biology. You don't have to be an accountant if you study if you study accounting. The way we've been sold our career path in the university setting, I think, is a complete farce. So it's being cognizant of the environment you're in and the opportunities that that presents to you, and the fact that you can actually invent your own stuff, right? You know, the one of the aha moments actually came from seeing Steve Jobs when he was younger, saying everything around him is made by another human. You know, this wall was built by a human. This light bulb was invented and built by a human. This, couch, the not only just the physical things, but the norms and the habits that we have are all formed by other humans. So if you realize that you are also a human, that is a very empowering thing. That you have the potential to do pretty much anything is pretty amazing. So those are a couple aha moments that I hope will be helpful to people.
Certainly. Do you have any role models that you look up to?
There are a lot of folks in the business world that I'm inspired by. I'm not necessarily mirroring them or following their path. So those are folks that I think shoot for the stars and just do ridiculous things. The classic guys and gals. The Elon Musks of the world, right? These folks are incredibly inspiring. So for me, it's understanding that a human being is capable of doing all these things, and this person just proved that they can. And that just makes me feel, again, more powerful.
I'm curious, what is your definition of a thriving life?
I think it's simple. It's constantly learning, right? If you're learning something new every day, you are thriving. If you're not learning, you're dying. And it's pretty binary. So if you're not learning where you are, get out or find something to learn in that environment, which usually you can. You could learn in any setting. And learning is not just reading a book and getting new knowledge. Learning is seeing someone else do it faster and understanding why and how they figure that out. Doing something more efficiently and discovering something about something that you didn't realize existed before. These are all things that come with curiosity and learning. Some people just go by as a drone. You just don't need to. There's always a way to look at the world where you will uncover so many delightful things. And I think that's the way to thrive.
So that might be easy for an entrepreneur who has their own business and schedules their own meetings and their day. And for someone who is employed and their office job, what would be their first step? What would you recommend them to do in order to start going off the script and not become a drone, just like you said?
I think first is mastering the script and understanding the place in life that you're in. So For example, you could be in the most mundane of jobs. Let's say you're flipping burgers at McDonald's. You could either be depressed about it and just be a drone and just flip burgers like a machine, or ask questions like, how can I do this more efficiently? How can I be the best at this? How can I find other opportunities for me to show my skills? Maybe I'm better with interacting with customers, so I should be at the till. And maybe I'll meet people if I go out and help clean tables when really no one ever does it at a McDonald's because everything's gross. So all these things where you go above and beyond will help you get promoted. It will help you start to see certain things in the world, and will get you up there in that space. So I think constantly striving for mastery in whatever you have already is a way to learn. The other is reading and understanding outside of your job where you fit. Well, I'm working in a franchised operation that's owned by a larger corporation. Well, McDonald's is really about the brand. Everyone seems to only understand, that I could remove the brand and keep the food and apply another brand. It could be different feeling to it. So there's a lot to do with brand. So maybe I'm fascinated by branding. Maybe I want to start studying this. Maybe I want to start working at a company that specializes in branding. And so just from one little boring, seemingly depressing job that I just started with, I just unearthed a whole multitude, a whole world of opportunities that you could see just from one little site. So I think people sometimes just are way too harsh on themselves and suffocate themselves without giving them the opportunity to find all the delights within the most mundane. And I think that's really again, another way to thrive.
Very beautiful put. Thank you, Brian. With your business schedule, how do you, so to speak, walk away? How do you relax? How do you get away?
Well, last night I went to the New York Philharmonic. It was a 3-hour performance of Mozart's music, played against the film Amadeus, which was amazing, totally delightful. So sometimes, at least, once every few weeks, I'll indulge in something like that. And then, it's my birthday, so tomorrow will be my birthday. I'm going to spend the weekend in Miami. So there are excuses that I'll use to unplug. And one of the frameworks I've expressed in my book is a cheat code called Take a Splurge Day, which is essentially at least once every month, at least, take one day where all you do is everything you love in that one day, if you can cram it all in there. So for me, I love skiing, so I might go skiing. I love wine. I might drink wine. I might combine them both. It's a bit dangerous, but drinking wine and skiing is still pretty fun. I love sushi. I could also eat sushi, drink wine, and go skiing the same day. So again, that's kind of what I try to do, is cram all these things in one day. But then you literally have this, sensory overload and happiness overload that kind of helps balance out a lot of the stuff that you're dealing with. And it's immediately just de-stressing. So, and I think if people go, I'm too busy for that, I can't take a day. I'm like, if you can't take a day to do a splurge day, you have horrible time management. Let's just be honest. There is no human being that should not be that busy where they cannot take that one splurge day. And it is better for your mental health and physical health to be able to do something like that.
Absolutely. It's important to basically unplug from time to time and then get back with more energy, a different kind of energy. In one of the interviews, I've heard you talk about meditation, and your definition of meditation is different. You see it differently. How do you see meditation?
I think meditation is just the ability to completely take your mind off of the current situation at hand, or the things that you're thinking about from a day to day, like at work or family or at, other personal issues. So the way I do it is, I just can't sit still. I just know I can't. So the whole idea of sitting there with your eyes closed is never going to work for me. However, things like skiing is a meditative activity for me, because you literally cannot think of anything else but skiing. Because if you do, you could severely injure yourself or die. So that's really important. Scuba diving, for example. So Sunday I'm going scuba diving in Miami, which I hope is not a terrible idea. But again, I'm not going to be thinking about anything else but not dying. because you're going to be submersed, 18 meters below the surface, and making sure that that you're breathing okay, your equipment's in check, and you're not interfering with sea life. So this is a multitude of activities. Sports is a big one too. Playing ice hockey is, for me, because I'm Canadian. So I encourage people to find the activity that is meditative in a way. And it truly could be just meditation or yoga, which is fine. But just for people like me, where you can't sit still for more than a minute or 2 minutes, this is important to have, so that you at least are able to take your mind off of these issues that are plaguing your everyday life.
Absolutely. I was going to mention skiing, and you went ahead and did. For the benefit of our listener, let's go over your book. There are four sections, and let's go. I'm going to name you the section. Tell me the big idea of that section, or one takeaway that if nobody had time to read the book or opens the book, they would get these points from this podcast and would be able to improve their everyday life. So the first section is be ballsy.
Yeah, so Be Ballsy is really about being bold and being that taking that extra step and being forward and intentionally attracting attention, especially when you don't have it, when you're first starting out. There's a time to be humble, and there's a time not to be humble, and this is really the main theme of that section.
Be you.
This is to be true to yourself, and don't try to pretend to be someone else, because that act is going to be hard to keep up for too long. But the more you are yourself, the more comfortable you are, the more successful you are. Simple examples like, just because someone tells you to wear a suit doesn't mean you have to do it. If you don't feel good wearing a suit, you're actually going to be you're going to be at a disadvantage because you feel uncomfortable wearing a suit. So these types of things are just very simple. I will show up to business meetings with a polo and jeans because I am the best at feeling comfortable when I'm feeling casual. And most people will respect that. Of course, there are places where you don't want to wear polo and jeans, like a funeral or a wedding. But I mean more just, again, in the entrepreneurial lifestyle, and kind of how you can define your own style in both visual and in mind is, I think, very important.
Be unforgettable.
Yes, self-explanatory. Just do stuff that makes it so people will never forget you. Just make sure it's not illegal.
Be a trailblazer.
Yeah, so trailblazing is really kind of what you said before. You're picking your own path. Just because someone told you to do it doesn't mean you have to do it. It doesn't mean that you'll be successful doing the same thing that they did either, because it's their own environment that they were successful in. So you should blaze your own trail.
Excellent. Brian, the book is awesome, and I think it will help any person, whether they're an entrepreneur or they're an employee, to get to where they want to get faster. These are valuable codes that you outlined in a very digestible form. In one of your interviews, you said you feel like there should be a part two to this book, and the part two of this book should be written by your parents. What made you feel that way, and what do you think they should write in that book about?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I realized was, obviously everything that I have has been created by my parents in terms of the training and the mindset. That mindset I told you about, kind of mastering and always finding that spice within even the most boring of things, actually came from my father. He had that mindset as he was working through the ranks. He was a taxi driver. He was a chef. He was a hub stamper at an auto factory. But every time he did anything, he would try to make sure that he was the best at it. And this made sure that he continued to succeed in the environment that he was in. So my parents have really been the source of a large percentage of these cheat codes. But I think people are curious, okay, well, how do you instill these values in a child? And they were able to do it. Obviously, it was their first time doing it with my brother, and second time with me. They seemed to figure something out. And I said, why don't you guys put together some cheat codes as well? So hopefully you guys will see cheat codes for parenting in bookshelves near you, which maybe in a few years. But that's the the plan.
That's a great plan, Ryan. I think it's a good idea. Great idea. Many parents would benefit from that. I would definitely encourage you to inspire them and push and motivate them to do that.
I can't wait.
Where can our listener find you? If they have any questions, they want to find out more about you, where can they get in touch with you?
They can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty responsive there, Brian_Wong. And then you can also email me. It's a pretty easy email to guess. I would challenge people to guess it because it's not hard to guess, and they can shoot me an email.
Excellent. Is there anything you'd like to share as we wrap up our today's great conversation, Brian?
No, I think this is really comprehensive, and I appreciate you having me on the Thriving Life podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian, for joining us at the club.
Thank you.
And there we have it. Another amazing guest has visited our club. Make sure to subscribe to the Thriving Life Club podcast on your favorite app. Simply go to thriving.lifeclub.com/ and the name of your favorite platform. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube. You get the point. You will find the show notes, the episode freebie, and the resources mentioned during the episode by navigating your browser to thriving.lifeclub.com/ and the number of this episode. For example, for the episode 3, you would go to thriving.lifeclub.com/ number 3. For the episode 7, you would go to thriving.lifeclub.com/ number 7. We want to make this podcast the number 1 podcast on iTunes in its category. When you feel inspired, head over to iTunes and give us a quick review to keep the podcast commercial free and get it discovered by more people like you and families like yours. Rate and review the podcast on iTunes and share it with your friends. Let's inspire more people together. And until the next episode, just remember, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, live a thriving life.